now is your host. Thank you so much for joining us today. All of the stories are chilling and scary. Our first story comes to us from Portsmouth, Virginia. At the time of the accident, Gary's brand new iPhone was in his pocket. When emergency workers arrived on the scene, they found that the phone had been destroyed by the impact. They even went so far as to smash it further to make sure that the screen was completely shattered. In 2008, Gary Penkley was killed when he crashed into a tree while driving home from work. He was just 34 years old. A couple of days later, on July 1st, Gary's wife, Mary, received a text message from his cell phone. Maybe the phone hadn't been destroyed as badly as they thought, and maybe it just happened to be near his house. It wasn't their responsibility to keep his personal items. So who had sent the message? And how did they know where Gary lived? However, when police officers checked Gary's house, they found out that the phone had actually been smashed to pieces. But she soon realized that it could have been one of three things. Either someone was playing a very cruel joke on her, or Gary's phone was still somehow active, or Gary himself had somehow managed to send the message from beyond the grave. She couldn't believe it because she knew that the phone had been destroyed in the accident. But only a few people had the old number, and none of them had sent her the message. Still, she never stopped wondering what it meant. She even started checking her phone every night at 2:41 a.m. just in case. Plus, Gary wouldn't have known the new number either, so it had to be a case of mistaken identity. Right? Well, not necessarily. As he picked up the phone and said hello, he heard a blood-curdling scream on the other end, and then the line went dead. At first, he thought that it might have just been a prank. After all, kids will do that kind of thing sometimes. So he hung up and went back to his day. Let's see if we can get this channel to 1 million subscribers. He didn't know anyone there, so he figured that whoever was calling him had to be some kind of telemarketer or scammer. So Robert called the local police department to see if they could trace the calls back to a specific location. Every time he answered, he would hear screaming, and then the caller would hang up. It was always a different one. But whenever Robert answered, he heard the same blood-curdling scream. Fortunately, the provider couldn't do anything either. They told Robert that if he wanted to trace the calls, he'd have to pay out of pocket, and it would cost thousands. This happened over and over again, day after day. He introduced himself and asked if Robert was the person whose number he had been calling. Robert confirmed that he was. That's when the man revealed what he had been doing. Then she saw that the message had been sent at 2:41 a.m., 2 days after Gary's funeral. He eventually passed away, but he had been suffering from dementia, so she wasn't sure if he knew what was going on around him. But 6 months later, her phone rang, and the caller ID said that it was her dad's phone. Each time the caller ID said that it was her dad's phone. Finally, she picked up and said hello. She didn't pick up because she thought that it must have been a wrong number. Just let it go to voicemail. You never know who's on the other end. Just ask Robert. She asked the ghost why he was there and what he wanted from her. And that asked when he told her that he'd come to apologize for being such a bad father. The woman told him that she had forgiven him a long time ago. Never had an experience like this, she told Inside Edition. It was really upsetting. I wasn't grieving. I was terrified. He asked her to meet him in a certain location. She didn't know what to do, but she ended up agreeing to meet him. Apparently, his friend had been kidnapped, and he'd been trying to call Robert for help. The man stood up when he saw her and said, "I've been waiting for you." But before he could explain further, the man on the phone screamed, and then everything went silent. He knew that he was sick and that he wouldn't be around for much longer. But instead of spending his last few months apologizing to his daughter, he had yelled at her and caused her pain. And he still gets calls from unknown numbers every now and then, because the phone should have been destroyed in the accident. Finally, he decided that he'd had enough. He needed to find out who was behind these terrifying calls. In fact, it was the number that he had been using for 12 years. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. What's more, there was no service in the house. Gary had passed away before his cell phone service was set up, and the phone had been turned off ever since. Before we move on, I want you guys to subscribe. The message read, "Help me. It's not over." The message was sent from Gary's home address, which didn't make any sense at first. Mary assumed that it must have been a mistake. Mary immediately called the funeral home to ask them if they had Gary's phone. Of course, they said that they didn't. She looked back at her phone. She saw that the number that had texted her was not just any number. It was Gary's number. For weeks, Mary was tormented by the message. She couldn't understand why she'd gotten it. Mary had recently changed her phone number and contacted her friends to let them know. Mary had asked everyone she could think of if they had sent the message, but nobody had. Sadly, Gary's family were never able to find out what had happened. Our next story is about a phone call from hell. If you're watching this at home, don't answer any calls from numbers you don't recognize. One day in 2014, Robert got a phone call from a number that he didn't know. However, later that week, he started getting more calls from the same number. And of course, each time Robert answered the phone, he asked, "Who is this?" But the caller never replied. Robert was starting to feel scared. The voices that he was hearing sounded genuinely terrified, and it seemed like they were getting closer. He tracked the number down to a small town in another state. They told him that they couldn't do that without a warrant, but they suggested that he contact his phone provider and see if they could help him. That's when Robert decided to stop fighting it. He simply blocked the number and tried to forget about it. But a few months later, the calls started again. And this time, they weren't coming from the same number. This continued until one day when Robert answered a call and a man on the other end started speaking to him. He explained that he had no idea how his friend had gotten Robert's number, but he'd begged him to call it. Robert immediately called the police and told them everything that had happened. But when they traced the call, it came back to a vacant lot. To this day, Robert has no idea who the man was or what happened to him. Our final story is about a spirit with unfinished business. A woman in South Dakota had an unsettling encounter with a ghost. She received a call from her deceased father. Talk about a fatherly call. She was taking care of her dying father in the last few months of his life. After he passed away, his phone was thrown away. Then the phone rang again, and then again, and then again. On the other end of the line was a man pretending to be her dad. When she got to the location, she saw a figure sitting on a nearby bench. Although the woman was terrified, she also felt compelled to speak to the ghost. He explained that he felt guilty about the way that he'd treated her while she was alive. He asked for her forgiveness and promised to never hurt her again. The ghost thanked her and then slowly faded away until he disappeared completely. Do you believe that ghosts are real? Let me know in the comments below. This story comes from a TikTok creator who goes by the name of Amma. If you're not familiar with TikTok, it's basically like YouTube but way worse, because no one can talk for longer than 20 seconds. Anyway, she's done some pretty funny skits on there, like this one, where she reviews an Amazon product that's supposed to help your plants grow faster. We then pan over to her computer where we see that there's a software program that lets you adjust all the settings. It also has facial recognition technology, so you can log into the account associated with the mirror using your face instead of a password. So one day she was going through the recorded clips, and she saw one that was saved under the date tomorrow. These feet have these fuzzy socks on them, and the person in the background is clearly not wearing any socks. This is the type of horror story that people would watch, even if they knew it was fake. She didn't respond to any of the comments, which is probably for the best because this video really doesn't need any more attention. Specifically, it gathers information about your height, weight, age, and gender. Every single website you visit tracks some type of data, which is why we built a browser extension that stops websites from tracking you. We release new episodes every week. You can find us on various platforms. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. It does this by blocking all third-party trackers and cookies, and it prevents websites from sharing your data with data brokers. You can install it on Chrome, Firefox, or Brave, and it works on all of them. Depending on what you're trying to do with this mirror, this information might be necessary. For example, if you're a yoga instructor, your age, height, and weight may be relevant. But how does your gender matter? Are you going to use the mirror to determine the gender of the people attending your class? Also, the video description contains a link to a privacy policy, so it is clear this company takes your privacy seriously and would never sell your data to third parties. Wait, no, they actually would. It turns out this company, like most companies these days, sells user data to third parties. However, they do give you the option to opt out. But wait, there's more. Their privacy policy explicitly states that children under the age of 13 are prohibited from using their products. Yet they're selling their products on Amazon, which allows people to buy things for kids. On top of that, the last time they updated their privacy policy was January of 2023. That means they weren't collecting any data until January of 2023, even though they say they've always collected data. This company is clearly hiding something. And the top comment reads, "The sock detail is what really got me," with another popular one saying, "Why did he record her?" But the biggest thing is that there's only one pair of feet, meaning the other one must belong to somebody else. This person stands behind her for a few seconds while she's sleeping. We can see the shadow of this person's hand holding the phone up. They move around a little bit, and we can see their outline. Looks like a man's shoe and pants. At one point, the person bends down and we can see their hair. They then walk out of frame and the video ends. When she clicked on it, it showed her sleeping with the mirror propped up against something in front of her. You can see the reflection of the ceiling fan above her and the lamp next to her bed. She looks like she's lying on her side, and the timestamp says 2:38 a.m. But something's not right here. In fact, she gets a little too comfortable with the mirror. Because later in the video, she just straight up lays down on the floor while looking at it, and even falls asleep at one point. Once she connects it to her Wi-Fi, she says, "Oh my God," because it's got cameras everywhere. Now we do want to actually get to see how many cameras it has, because the rest of the video is her talking about how she uses this smart mirror. It's very likely that this is fake. First of all, most of us know someone who likes to sleep with a mirror nearby, myself included. I've seen a lot of comments saying that the reason why people do this is so that if a burglar breaks in, they can scare them away by turning the lights on and making eye contact with them through the mirror. I've never thought of this before, but I guess it might work. I think the real reason people do this is so they can check themselves in the mirror to make sure they look good while they sleep. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I like to sleep with my phone on my chest. I do that so I can quickly check my social media, especially if I wake up in the middle of the night. Now imagine if you slept with a mirror nearby. You could literally check yourself whenever you wanted. In fact, this would probably be more effective than a phone because you can see your whole body in a mirror instead of just your face. This is just speculation, though. I mean, hell, maybe the reason why she fell asleep in front of it is because she had been watching herself sleep in the mirror all night long. Maybe she's just a narcissist. She puts two plants in separate pots. It's one with the powder and this one without. Then she waits 3 weeks and sees which one grows faster. The one with the powder wins. She then walks up to the camera and says, "I am so glad I bought this." So obviously she was paid to make this video. Sometimes she makes videos that aren't sponsored, and today's video is one of them. In this video, she's reviewing what appears to be a normal mirror, except it has a screen on the bottom that can display whatever you want and record videos at the same time. This type of product is typically marketed towards women who like to do makeup tutorials. That way they can film themselves doing the tutorial and then play it back and see if they missed anything. Or it could be useful for people who are doing a live stream and want to show themselves doing something, or maybe like a yoga instructor teaching a class. But this woman wants it for something completely different. She unboxes it and sets it up, and you can see the display on the bottom of the mirror has a bunch of different options for displaying the image. So it's got a feature where you can take a picture and have it identify the 5 best angles and upload those images to the cloud so you can look at them from anywhere. But let's get back to the main plot here, because that's just weird. There's a set of feet that we can see in the foreground, and they do unmatch the person in the background. We get a few more details from the comments. The video has over 7 million views, which makes sense. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. Either way, this smart mirror seems kind of creepy, with all the cameras and stuff. But it gets worse, because apparently this mirror collects data, and it's not the only company that does this. If you like this story, you should check out our podcast where we talk about stories like this one. A new dad in Ohio set up a baby monitor with night vision in his baby's nursery. It pinged at 3:12 a.m. Face detected. He checked the crib. Nothing. So he watched the replay and saw a man crawling on all fours under the crib, smiling. My wife was getting up with her early this morning, so I was on solo duty. I checked the camera, and there was no one in the room. I looked in the baby's direction just in case the camera was wrong, but nothing was there. I went back to the camera and clicked on the recorded clip. I tell the officer, and he says that he'll check it out. We both go upstairs, and the officer checks around and doesn't see anything. At this point, it's about 4:30 a.m. My wife gets home, and the officer lets her in through the garage and tells her what happened. They let me come back into the room with the baby, and we decide to keep her in our room instead of putting her back in the bassinet. The camera had been recording for about 2 minutes prior to sending me the alert. And look at the picture the camera took when it pinged me at 3:12. Now, let's think about this objectively and logically for a moment. I'm just wondering why you felt compelled to call the cops, but not grab your gun and defend yourself. I'm confused by that part because I carry a gun. If somebody broke into my house, I would not hesitate to grab my firearm and confront that person. Generally speaking, if someone breaks into your home, they will continue to hide somewhere inside your home. So if the police are sweeping the house, and this guy is hiding somewhere in your home, eventually they might find him. I don't understand this. This makes no sense. And when they leave, they should leave with them, and then allow them to leave the house. But leaving you alone in your home while the police leave, this makes no sense whatsoever. If a home invasion just occurred, the police should not leave. I mean, hell, they should set up a perimeter around the house and not allow anybody to come or go from the house. Nobody should be allowed to leave the house until the police have done a complete investigation. But if you burst into the room and tackle this guy, you have a better chance of catching him and restraining him than the cops. And I'm assuming that most people that carry a gun would react the same way. Maybe I'm in the minority here, I don't know. The reason they probably left was because your wife wasn't home yet. So I guess they wanted to ensure that you were on alone and that your wife would be home soon. But regardless, if a home invasion just occurred, the police should not have left. But why did you choose to wait, OP? But for future reference, if you feel threatened by somebody entering your home, you should grab your gun. Waiting for the police to arrive could end up costing you your life, your loved ones' lives, or even worse, your baby's life. And confront that individual yourself rather than calling the police and waiting for them to come. A man is crawling around under your baby's crib, and this makes you think to grab your gun. Do you know how many people break into homes and abduct infants? This happens more often than you would expect. Should you have grabbed your gun and confronted this man? It's for sure. Not only for your own personal protection, but for the protection of your baby. Why didn't you grab your gun when you initially saw the man crawling around on all fours under your baby's crib? You actually took the time to call the cops and wait for them to come over before grabbing your gun. We zoom in on the guy's face and see that he has a big smile on his face and his eyes are completely black. The officer who came to the house is now our family friend and is looking into it. My wife and I are pretty shaken up by this, and we've re-worried about our safety and the safety of our baby. Also, this man crawling under the crib was smiling, so that's great, just great. I'm really creeped out at this point. I take the SD card out of the camera and bring it inside so that I can look at the video on it directly and not have to worry about it being off by the time the police come back. On the recording, I see my dog in the room briefly, but then I see a man crawling on all fours under the baby's bassinet smiling. He looks at the picture of the guy and asks if I want to make a statement. I tell him that I don't feel comfortable doing so without my wife there. Glad you got that $20 though. It would really piss me off if someone stole $20 from my wallet when they were crawling around in my house. But Op, why did you have your gun in the first place? You had your gun in the first place because you're allowed to protect yourself and your family, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, man. He says that's fine, and to let him know if I change my mind. He also gives me a card for their tip line and tells me to call if I think of anything else or if I notice anything missing. Ivy got an Arlo Pro camera that we put in the room to keep an eye on her while she's sleeping. It has night vision and sends alerts to my phone whenever it detects a face. Usually it's when my wife or I walk into the room, but every once in a while it will detect our dog. What did this man see that night? Let's go to Reddit, where it's all started. This story comes from a user. I have a 3-month-old baby girl who sleeps in our room in a bassinet next to our bed. I immediately call 911. They send a cop car by first to check on us, but they can't find anything. They eventually send an officer and a canine. We let them in, and they do a sweep of the house. The cop who comes in asks if anyone else is home. My wife and I say no. She should be back in 20 minutes. I asked the cops if they thought it was safe for me to go check on my daughter, and they said yes. I grab my gun and go to the baby's room. At 3:12 a.m., I got an alert that read, "Face detected." I get out of the room and stand in the hallway while the officer looks under the bassinet and checks the rest of the room. Once he's satisfied that everything is okay, he tells me that he's gone, "Nah, have my wife come home a different way, and that I need to stay awake until she gets here." He continues to crawl on all fours past the camera and out of frame. The officer follows me into the room and tells me to clear the area while he checks the baby's bassinet. After about 15 minutes, I hear what sounds like heavy footsteps above us. In the morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, we go through the footage again when the officer comes back. I show him the pictures and videos I've taken. Later in the day, I noticed that a $20 bill is missing from my wallet. Yeah, rightfully so. Also, this happened in Lima, Ohio. So if you live in the area and you have any information, please contact the police.
First of all, nice story, Op. Well, maybe nice is not the word I want to use here, but thank you for sharing.
Now, I'm not trying to be judgmental or preach or pass any kind of judgment. If you saw a man crawling around on all fours under your baby's crib in the middle of the night, wouldn't you instantly think that this is a huge emergency and grab your gun? So I'm curious to know why you chose to wait for the cops instead of grabbing your gun and confronting the intruder yourself. Another weird thing that I found strange was when the police arrived, you actually gave them permission to do a sweep of the house. Generally, I think it is best not to allow the police to enter your home if someone just broke in, especially if the intruder is still hiding somewhere in your home. Another thing I found strange was the fact that the police left and then told you to stay in the room and watch your baby while the police went away. And even if they do a complete investigation and they say, yeah, everything's fine, everybody can leave. And why did the police leave in the first place? Finally, Op, I think you made the right choice by keeping your baby in your bedroom instead of putting her back in the bassinet. Some things just take too long when you call the cops. That's all for this video. See you in the next one. I am 17 years old and my mom is 43. She has been married to my dad for about 24 years now. And another person replied to that saying, "Why are you telling him to run?" I was FaceTiming my best friend around 12:30 a.m. because we do that a lot. They explain there's a chance that this is some sort of glitch, but a bad one that you just happen to run into. And they say, "Ope, I really hope you listened to what I said. Your friend may not want you to tell someone, but Ope, this is bigger than both of you. This could save her life. Please, please tell someone. But there's also a chance that this is serious and your friend needs help." And they say, "OP, I understand wanting to get a straight answer from your friend, but OP, this isn't something you need an answer for. Thank you all for the advice. I really appreciate it. I'm going to tell my mom tomorrow and see what she thinks. I'm glad I posted this because now I actually have a plan. I'm going to write down everything that happened since it first started happening, and I'm going to show it to her. Thank you all so much for listening to my story and giving me advice. I really appreciate it. This is something you need action on. Think of this situation like this. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like these. Imagine if your friend came to you and said, "Hey, my parents are arguing and I'm scared they're going to get a divorce." Would you tell her, "Oh, don't worry, they won't get a divorce. Don't worry, everything's fine"? No, you would tell her to speak to a trusted adult. That's exactly what you need to do here. Again, OP, this could save your friend's life. So, please tell someone. Either way, you need to speak to a trusted adult, whether it's another family member, teacher, a counselor, etc. If it is a glitch, they might be able to help figure out what's causing it. And if it isn't, your friend needs help, and you should get that for them. Even if your friend doesn't want that help right now, you should still tell an adult. We have a group chat, and sometimes we fall asleep on FaceTime. We just leave our phones there and go to sleep. Tell your parents, tell a teacher, tell the school counselor, tell anybody who can help, because this is super creepy. I would feel better if someone knew about it, and you should too. I just wish I could get a straight answer from my friend. The last time something weird like this happened, it ended up being a false alarm. I was freaking out over nothing. I don't want to do that again. I also forgot to ask if the glitch was happening on her end too. I'll ask her tomorrow. Also, keep your phone charged and by your bed, and keep it on airplane mode, so you can call for help if it happens at night. Whatever's happening, I hope it gets resolved soon, because this is some horror movie level stuff. Well, today, 12:30 a.m. rolled around, and we were on FaceTime. Because if this glitch is happening at night and not during the day, it might be worth asking if she's using her phone near a window where moonlight is shining through or something like that. Just a random thought. My friend looked over at her phone and said, "Hey, your screen is glitching again." Looked over and it showed my room. I thought it was odd, but it happens all the time, so I didn't think much of it. Then I turned to look back at her, and the other side of the screen showed me sitting in my bed in the dark with a flashlight on my face. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't recording anything. I tried to take a screenshot, but the photo just disappeared. It was so scary. I hung up on her and tried to call her back, but she didn't answer. I kept trying and trying until about 1 a.m. Then she finally answered, and I asked her, "Did you record that?" And she said, "Record what?" And I said, when my face was on the screen, was it flashing in the background? She said, yes, but why? And I said, was it a picture? She said, no, it was you. You were sitting on your bed with a flashlight on your face, looking directly at the camera. Then she started crying, and she said, don't hang up. Don't hang up. Please don't hang up. And I said, are you okay? And she said, I saw you kill someone. Before I could respond, the FaceTime ended, and my phone went straight to voicemail. I called her back, and I kept calling and calling, but she didn't answer. Then I got a text from her that said, don't call me again. I don't want to talk to you. I was freaked out. This is beyond a creepy glitch. I know this is stupid, but I kept staring at my phone waiting for it to happen again. And around 2 a.m. it happened again. This time I quickly grabbed my phone and took a screenshot. I sent the screenshot to my friend, but she still hasn't responded. I'm scared to go to sleep now. What do I do? And they explained, because if she's willing to hide something like that from him, I'm guessing she's hiding other things too. It's best he knows sooner rather than later. Recently, she started acting very strangely. She would come home late from work almost every day, claiming that there was overtime, even though she never did any overtime before. And she would always tell me that she had a late meeting with the girls, which I find weird, because I've never heard of her having any friends or even leaving the house without my dad in the past 17 years. I also noticed that she would spend hours on the phone in her room with the door closed. I would knock on the door, but she would tell me to go away several times. On one occasion, I was FaceTiming my friend, and suddenly, the screen split in half. On one side, it showed my room, and on the other side, it showed me sitting in the dark with a flashlight on my face while smiling. I wasn't recording anything. There were no filters applied, and I wasn't in any kind of video chat. I tried to take a screenshot so that I could show my friend, but the image just disappeared. I told my mom about what happened, but she just laughed it off and said, what are you talking about? It sounds ridiculous. So let's get into it. First up is, I think my parents might be getting a divorce. Down in the comments, we have this story from another user that says, uh-oh, op, run. This next story is called FaceTime for myself. In the comments, we have this story from another user who says, you need to speak to a trusted adult. This next comment is from the same user that commented before. We also have this story from another user who says, dude, tell somebody. Tell anybody. Another person said, does anyone else think it's strange that she only FaceTimes at night? And then the original poster responded and said, yeah, I guess I will have to tell someone tomorrow. This next comment is from the same user that commented before. Finally, we have this story from another user who says, it's absolutely insane how many people care about this. All right, that is all for today.